as I mentioned, the Conservative Party is kind of leaderless. And they may start to realise, wait, didn't we have a guy recently who actually inspired people? Tories urged to bring back Boris Johnson back for game-changing general election campaign. Ahead of what Tory MPs are dubbing Apocalypse Week for the party, Rishi Sunak has been warned he needs to bring back Boris Johnson or lose catastrophically. Let me give just a little bit more backstory into why this is being said. Where is it? Shock poll for Tories as Jacob Rees-Mogg and Jeremy Hunt lose seats in red wall moment countryside poll shock. Jacob Rees-Mogg is fairly successful fairly popular among Conservatives. He's the incredibly traditional aesthetic Conservative in the Tory party, who is not great in terms of his policies and beliefs, but is better than the average. But according to polls, he's potentially losing his seat. Jeremy Hunt, less popular, but he's been around for so long. A new poll of the countryside suggests Labour may be heading for their own red wall moment. There's a poll of this, there is a poll that suggests that the Conservatives will be fourth place behind the Liberal Democrats and what was the third one? Was it like the Greens or something? Oh no, it was SNP. Fourth place, the UK having been a two-party system for generations. And that Labour will have like 300 more seats that they had last election. It's concerning. What you can say, though, is it is interesting times. I'm not looking forward to living through them, really, but perhaps we will see a sudden flip back in the other direction next time. Don't know. So that's happening. And then Richard Tice hails proof that Tories are terrified of Reform UK in crunch by-election. So there's also a little bit of hope that Reform UK, which is slightly more based, I think it's a party that was originally established by Farage, may be challenging the Conservatives as well. But unfortunately, even in the areas where Reform is doing well, it might be Labour wins them. It may be that Reform UK is in fact just a spoiler for the Conservatives and slices their votes in half. So I would like to see Reform UK get some more power, because though I don't know much about them these days, and I don't think Farage is that involved with them, they can't be worse than Labour. They can't be worse than the current state of the Tories, I don't think. Okay, we'll get on with this article about Boris then. An ex-senior minister has told Express.co.uk that bringing back Boris Johnson in an election role is the only thing that can save the party, but warned that fellow Tory MPs who criticised the former Prime Minister are too arrogant to admit they made a mistake. I think they did. I was saying this around the time. You guys could remember this. I was saying, yes, that was wrong, but they shouldn't get rid of him because that would be stupid. With the party ranging from 20 to 29 points behind Labour in different polls, which is catastrophic, senior figure, that's worse than the Conservatives were ahead in 2019, I think. I may be wrong about that, but it's very bad anyway. Senior figures in the government have admitted that the general public have stopped listening to us. The thing is, like, the Conservatives were, for at least the last 5 years, if not 10, I think they were constantly on this continuing, like, okay, fine. We'll trust you for now because of the things that you've just done that have shown that you've changed. We'll trust you for now. We'll trust you for now. And then finally, they lost the lure. They lost the appeal of the public. They got rid of Boris and they had no one to replace him with. And so 15 years of waiting for the Conservatives to do the thing it looked like they were just about to do have culminated in, we are absolutely sick of you now, and just completely dumping them to the side. Now, I'm not a fan of the Tories, but I think they probably are still a better bet than Labour. But I don't know. Let's see. Tomorrow it is expected that inflation will rise to 4.4%, hitting the cost of living, while on Thursday GDP results are which could see the UK economy in a recession, weird wording, meaning that it is shrinking. Both would mean that Mr. Sunak will be seen to be failing to keep his pledges of bringing down inflation and growing the economy. Also, two Conservative safe seats are being fought over in by-elections on Thursday, with defeat expected in both, and fears that the party could come third to Reform UK in Wellingborough. That would mean that, as I said, Reform UK wouldn't get the seat, but they'd be a lot closer to maybe getting it next time. It would be like, that's one thing that you could say, chat, is that if the Conservative Party collapses, we would have to go through 5 years of Labour, which we may be able to survive, but then during those 5 years, one of the things that could happen is that Reform UK could just take all the Conservative votes, especially if during that time, and actually literally replace the Conservative Party. Hasn't happened in like over 100 years that one of the two major parties has been replaced, but it could happen now. If Labour is, in fact, not the godsend that they almost certainly won't be, if they don't actually do any of the things that the Conservatives also didn't do, which is almost certainly what's going to happen, then people will be desperately looking for any other solution. And Reform UK will be there, having almost won a seat last time and having a lot of good ideas and genuinely, I think, caring about immigration. They might, in fact, become the second party or perhaps even first party on the next election. The Wets will infiltrate them as well. Possibly Chilgwan, possibly, but it'll take longer anyway. Field says Starmer is an avowed Keynesian, so expect money print to go burr to get even worse. Yep, I know. I mean, Keynesian is still better than communist, but hey, the Conservatives are also Keynesians, so actually some of them probably aren't. Some of them probably are more Austrian, but not very many. As I said, it's been 15 years, and he's not quite as left as Corbyn. Maybe we'll be surprised by like some shock. Oh, he actually supports that thing. That's weird, because they want to get the middle class, so working class on side. Now, I don't think it's likely. I'm trying to give you any hint of optimism here, that maybe it won't be as bad as it seems. With despondency growing, the party has now been hit by an exodus of Tory MPs to the exit door, with 57 declared so far, including the latest two, former Sports Minister Tracy Crouch and former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. If I remember correctly, was Kwasi Kwarteng one of the brown but somewhat based ones, or was he brown but not based? I know that Kemi Badenoch and Suella Braverman are the other two. I thought Kwasi was all right as well. Senior Tory MPs are now... It could be that there's a resurgence of the based members of the party. We could see maybe even Boris Johnson coming back, though he's not as based as some. We could see Priti Patel coming back, who didn't do very well before, but maybe she was being hamstrung by something else. Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch and some other good ones. There are some good Tories out there, just not really that many with charisma who could lead the party. That's what they need right now. But Rishi Sunak seems to be sort of just the neo-lib brown face empty suit that they've slapped onto it. I think they could do better. And they've got 5 years to reform their party after they lose to Labour. Let's bloody hope they use it, or that someone does. Senior Tory MPs are now pleading with Rishi Sunak to get on the phone to Boris Johnson and plead for his help. But one former minister, a Johnson ally, offered little hope that will happen. The senior MP said, bringing back Boris would be a game changer, especially in the red wall seats and marginals. Bringing back Boris would help, but I don't think it would save the party. It would be the closest thing that I could think of that they could do right now to help the party, but I don't think it would save it. Well, you know me, chat. I think I have a bias towards optimism generally in politics, and maybe that's for the best. I think a lot of people prefer that I don't just do doom and gloom all the time. It's difficult to do that here. I am somewhat pessimistic about this future. But bear in mind, and this is something I tell people a lot, and it's very important. Patience is one of the most important virtues when dealing with politics. And don't forget that a lot of people are watching what's happening. A lot of people will get an impression about what to do next from what happens in reality. Trump is doing better now than he was in 2020. Why? Many reasons. But one of those reasons is because people have lived under Biden for 4 years, and they know what the alternative is. And they hate it. So loads of people... Trump is really popular right now, even more than he was in 2020, and much more than he was in 2016. Like, there's a few little points for optimism there. And also, Labour wants to keep this victory, and there is a genuinely large portion of the UK who is pushing for doing something about immigration. In most of the polls that I've seen about UK opinion, the most important, or in the top 3 at least, issue to the British public is immigration. So
yes, but the immigration being too high has been the opinion of the British public since before our grandparents were born, and it's just continually gotten worse.
I agree.
The opinion of the public being that immigration is too high will not solve the immigration issue.
No, I agree. My point is only that, and again, it's just a small hint of hope here, but that if Starmer wants to keep a lot of the working class who today are strongly in favour of reducing immigration, as you said, yes, it's always been the case, but even more because it has got worse, and you can see the footage of the boats and of all that stuff. that maybe he will do more about it than the Conservatives have. Maybe the Conservatives were being held back or were deliberately doing nothing about it, and that Labour don't have that limitation for whatever reason, but this is all distant hope. I'm trying to give you something here, chat. By the way, 5 years of hell may instruct the British public that, holy shit, we need a better option than this. Though it will be unpleasant to live through. Simon says Biden looks so bad that even Adam and Sitch can't defend him anymore. Yeah. Nothing meaningful will change. We'll just get digital IDs pushed through. Yeah, it might be that bad. It might just be worse. Just categorically worse. You might be right, unfortunately.
One of my biggest fears is that this is going to sound like a conspiracy theory, but I'm not trying to, but I have a feeling that they're going to do something along the lines of, hey, we're going to tackle immigration, and you know how we're going to do it? We're going to make it so you can't exist in this country unless you have a digital ID. And you know what the illegal immigrants can't get? They can't get digital IDs. And they're going to push it through, trying to appeal to the British population at large, and even people more on the sort of esoteric right side, where I suppose we find ourselves, by going, hey, look at this measure, it's going to fix the immigration issue. And then it's just digital ID.
Yep.
That's a fear I have at the moment.
A couple other people in chat have said the same thing. That's very possible. Yeah, it could get really bad. I think Motch, you need to learn to live like me, where I'm just as isolated as I possibly can be from the outside world. And I'm not actually that affected by any of these crazy policies. Not as much as some people are. So yeah, that and many more bad things probably will happen. And it's going to be very difficult for me to find any reason for optimism in the UK. But if I do say something that sounds optimistic, chat, don't assume that I'm saying that in ignorance of how bad it's likely to be. Anyway, let's continue. But the question is, will the very people in the parliamentary party who ousted him, Boris, let him play a role, or will they continue to put their arrogance, egos, and personal ambitions before the success of the natural party of government, they say? Now, the Conservative Party have long had this tendency of completely ignoring the one person who could help them most, which in the past has been Farage, and now they would even be better off with Boris than what they have now. So, I don't think it's that likely that they'll do it. But there's a bit more on this. Rishi Sunak urged to take Boris Johnson out for a drink to persuade him to save the Tories. So this article is roughly the same story, but he's been urged by more or different people. And then we actually have a statement from Boris, who says that he'll only return to politics if Rishi Sunak gives him a call. So it's all lined up for it to happen, but will Rishi do it? I mean, again, if Rishi does this, it won't necessarily save the party. So those of you in chat who want to be doom and gloom, if I ask you, press 1 if you think Rishi will do it, you don't have to press 2 just to be doom and gloom. But you can press 2 if you think Rishi's ego won't permit it. So I'm not sure. I suspect not. But it's possible, because they are going to lose horrifically if they don't. And even if they do, they probably will lose, but maybe not as badly. The former Prime Minister has been touted to return to politics to help energise the Conservative Party's campaign for the next election. Boris Johnson's return to frontline politics is wholly dependent on Rishi Sunak biting the bullet and giving the former Prime Minister a phone call, it has been claimed. Why am I being pinged by, of all people, Falco? What has happened? According to the Telegraph, Mr. Johnson would want a personal call from the current Prime Minister if he wants any help to campaign for the general election, expected to be held later this year. Bear in mind, I don't think Boris would come back unless he is Prime Minister. Even if they were making him some really high up role, I don't think he would bother. And frankly, I don't think I would care unless he's Prime Minister. Now, those of you who are in the UK, I'm curious actually, those of you who are in the UK, are you, and you don't have to tell me obviously, it's confidential if you want it to be, are you planning on voting for Conservative this year, right now, like this next election, even in their current state? And those of you that aren't going to be, would you if Boris was put into a Prime Minister spot? Because I think last time I voted UKIP on principle, because Farage is better than most, and they didn't win, but I think it's still better to vote on principle, because the vote being off by 1 is so unlikely that it doesn't matter. No and no. Well, Motch, I believe it's the first time you're going to be able to vote in a UK general election. And I know it's not a good example to be able to vote in. But and again, you don't have to tell me, or you could tell me in private later if you want. But are you planning to vote for Conservative reform, or are you just not going to bother?
You know where I live. You know exactly what the point would be of me voting.
I suppose so, yeah. Stark raving loony party, I guess so would I guess so much. Is it like I won't ask, but I don't know who it is in your area, but I think I can guess, and yeah, I don't think it would be much point. The only way to move is to abstain. Well, abstaining doesn't help. Like if you vote for a party, you have a better chance of helping than abstaining. It really is about whether you can be bothered to get up and do it. But I would understand at the moment people not really bothering. Vote for Charles, says Ghost. Like with the current state of British politics, if Charles or preferably William were to just say, okay, full reset or something, I don't know. It's not a good solution, but no, I don't think that will be better because the problem is the public opinion. The problem isn't the structures. The problem is the public opinion. And I don't think Charles would be a strong leader. Perhaps William would be, but I don't know. There's not very many good options. Ginger says, I say vote for whatever makes the most journalists and politicians complain the most. I don't know what it will accomplish, but it will make them feel worse, which will make me feel better. Yeah, this year in British politics, I wouldn't really blame anyone for not voting because the polls do look bloody hopeless. I would still view it as a point of principle that I probably will still vote even if it doesn't make any difference. But maybe that's a waste of my time. Yeah, whereas I have heard a lot of people saying that Charles is a WEF puppet. And I don't know if William is or not, but there's a chance we might be getting William relatively soon. As Motch said before the stream, the royals and the royal family in general don't tend to announce health issues unless it's really serious. So Charles's cancer might be a lot worse than we think.
Trisha Paytas is pregnant with her second kid. A royal's gotta go. That's how it happened last time. That's how it's gonna happen again. Trisha Paytas gave birth to her baby daughter on like the same day Elizabeth died, and now she was pregnant, and people were joking like, King Charles, you will start to cough in 3 days, and now he has cancer. So I'm sorry I ever doubted you, weird internet rumor mill.
Voodoo says voting legitimizes the system. Don't vote if the system is broke. I don't think the system is. I don't think the structure is broke. I don't think the parliamentary democratic system we have in this country is itself the problem. Though there are specifics about it that I would change, maybe. The problem is the people that are in it, ultimately. So I don't think that's the problem. Voting is fine. If anything, the problem is propaganda. More so in this country than in the US, where the problem is both propaganda and election rigging. I think election rigging is much rarer here, but also things move slower. So perhaps that gives agents of the establishment more time to manipulate things. The publication reports that insiders at Tory HQ are plotting to deploy Mr. Johnson on the campaign trail later this year, despite a row between Mr. Sunak and the ex-PM over his honours list in 2023. However, it appears Mr. Johnson has yet to be approached for help. As I said, if you're just going to ask him to campaign for you, don't bother. That's going to be worth 1 or 2 points at most in the polls. If you make him Prime Minister again, it's risky. You might get less points in the polls for doing that, but maybe you would get 10. You're still not enough, but it would be better. A source close to the former Labour leader suggested that in any event, Mr. Johnson would expect a personal phone call from Mr. Sunak. I mean, you would think so, wouldn't you? It's a lot to ask. Especially if they're not saying, well done, you are the new PM. If they're just saying, could you please go out walking and talk to people and say that we're good even though we hate you? That's a lot to ask. You would expect it to be personal from the PM. Further still, it is unclear if Mr. Johnson would ever accept such a proposal. Last week in Wellingborough, a focus group of 7 voters gave an indication of why senior members of the Tories might be pining for Mr. Johnson's return. He is widely considered among the Conservatives' most formidable campaigners when it comes to election time. I wish he just hadn't been a hypocrite about the COVID stuff. If he just hadn't done that, because he's still better than any other Conservative leader that's come since him, which is not a high bar. 4 of the focus group, the Telegraph reports, gave up on the Tories after his departure in 2022 and the subsequent squabbling over who would replace him. Yeah, I think a lot of people did. I practically did as well. All 7 of the group backed Mr. Johnson when he was Tory leader going into the 2019 general election campaign, which a lot of people did back. Mr. Sunak was unfavourably compared to Mr. Johnson, being described as a show businessman. Though the pair fell out, Mr. Sunak, who was formerly Mr. Johnson's Chancellor, has claimed to have spoken to the Tory heavyweight on occasion. A source said, we want the whole Conservative family to come together to beat Keir Starmer and Labour at the next election. You don't have a lot of time, I don't think, to get that going. Boris and everyone else united in that aim will of course be welcome. Mr. Sunak has faced a number of crises in recent months, including a fallout over his Rwanda policy plan, which is, like, we talk about ending immigration and then starting to reverse it, to actually start deporting people. The Rwanda policy is like, if I'm being optimistic, I see it as the first attempt to start that reversing process, just a foot in the door to start the reversing process of sending people back. And that's maybe a nice way of viewing it, because maybe it's just a ruse, maybe it's just nothing, and they're just trying to it's red meat. It probably is that, but, it's... Would I rather it succeeded or failed? Succeeded. Because it's something. But the problem is still the people flooding in, and the fact that even the Rwanda policy isn't working. We can't even send, like, a handful of people back to some other country. And I think a lot of that problem is the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, which we should have already left by now, but for some reason we haven't. Mr. Johnson's possible conversation with Mr. Sunak comes against a backdrop of the former PM himself wishing to return, with many inside the party hoping he does. Yeah. I expect the majority of the backbenchers hopes that he returns, and it might be that the quote-unquote old guard, who actually were new relatively recently, are the only ones who are arrogant enough to want to keep him out. Among the biggest voices calling for his return is Andrew Griffith, who became the first member of the government to support his comeback. He described Mr. Johnson as a great voice, while another MP said he could win us the next election if he joined the campaign trail. I don't know about that. He'd give you a better chance, though. Last year, Mr. Johnson himself issued a direct message to Daily Express readers when he promised, "I'll be back," after reflecting on his ousting as Prime Minister. Yeah, so I don't know. As it looks right now, I don't think even Boris Johnson returning as PM would win the Tories the election. Not even narrowly. And the rest of us, by extension, largely kind of doomed. As I said, it's not unrecoverable, but it's not going to be pleasant to live through it. Let trust back in and see what her economic reforms actually do. I was kind of curious. Yeah, some of it was insane. Some of it was a really bad idea. But some of it seemed potentially viable. But yeah, who knows? When Labour starts putting shit like digital ID, I'm going offline, says Sifos. We may have to use VPNs more rigorously. To be more careful with how we use the internet. She just says, when it comes to UK politics, I am squarely in the accelerationist camp. I want the most extreme people to start pulling random levers just to mix up things and see what happens. And you said above about Liz Truss. Yes, I did take you seriously. When Liz Truss came in, I was kind of like, that's odd. That's what the hell could happen here? It was mad. It was chaotic. It was mad woman. It was about to switch all the levers backwards from what they were before. But I was kind of, okay, let's see what that does. I'm with you on that, Ginger, even at the time. Because I preferred Boris, but fine, if they're going to get rid of him, let's see what this madwoman does. But they've ousted her, and I think it was what you could call an aristocratic, anti-democratic ousting of Liz Truss. Because maybe, to be fair, maybe the money people sensed that this would be terrible for the economy. Maybe they were right, but maybe we just need any kind of shake-up right now. Then again, that said, I've discouraged that kind of attitude because there's so many more ways to do it wrong than to do it right. So yeah, I don't know. I can understand where you're coming from there, Ginger, and maybe I'll be there after a few years of Labour if it is really bad. But I still generally would advocate for healing rather than resurrection as a safe option. Sunak is more controllable, I expect, Sifos, yes, and perhaps that was the only reason. That may be true. No, Pima, I wouldn't trust the money people unless, because if the economy were to collapse, they would also suffer. So if they honestly believed the economy was about to collapse with Truss's policies, maybe they were right. But at the same time, they probably have plenty of other motives that we wouldn't like. There was a lot of other things she was talking about. Like, Liz Truss was literally outwardly saying, don't worry, our kids will pay for it. She said that. She said, we'll take out massive loans. And I don't know what she was going to use them for, but something or other. And our kids will pay for it. That was her that was part of her policy. It was like, that sounds nuts. If you used that money in the absolute best way possible, the best way you could imagine, maybe it would help in some ways. And there were other things she was saying that I liked more than that one, but some really worrying stuff. Yeah, I agree, Zifos, that's already the case. The thing is, she was saying, yes, but more now, which may have been a terrible idea. Yeah, Ammo, I'd like to see a UK farmers revolt as well. Maybe the only reason it hasn't happened yet is because we sort of slowed the pace of EU shitty policy implementation by leaving. We actually left in the very beginning of 2020, I think. So since then, there haven't been consistently getting worse encroachments of EU policy. Now, maybe our own government has been doing the same policies, I don't know, but that may be why there are no farmers' protests here, because they're not quite at the point where they cannot function anymore, whereas in many European countries they literally are. Still, I would rather be outside the EU. That's still a much better option, and maybe those farmers would as well. It would be good if the EU stopped existing, so of course, yes. But we aren't fully outside the EU. As I say, we still have the European Court of Human Rights, which is making it difficult to deal with immigration. It sounds like a good thing, but so do a lot of things that are bad. Cast into the fires whence it was made. We may get our wish, Ziphos. It may happen soon. And if the EU does collapse, we will have had the preparation time and therefore the flexibility to outmaneuver Europe as they are in that. Like, if it collapses while they're still depending on it, they're going to be a lot more unstable than we were by simply leaving it. Well, perhaps that's what it needs, a reform.